Hello and welcome back to everyone that's tuned in to the American Ultra Stock channel. Thank you so much for being here. Today, as we always do, and well, Braden, to give all the credit, very diligent to keep up with the USYNT, we're going to be reviewing the roster of the U20s. As everybody knows, or if you didn't now, you know, there will be having a camp in January as well. They'll be joining up with the Camp Cupcake squad for, I don't know, some scrimmages, perhaps a little friendly behind closed doors, and also Nashville. So here's the roster that has been called up, and I'll just read through the list right here and ask Braden for his critique or commentary and thoughts on the potential of these players, as well as some of you guys may not really keep up with them. There are some outliers right here. Also very difficult to release some of the most hyped up players that we have abroad. So even though it's U20, this is why you don't see Cole Campbell and the names that may be a little bit more popular. But starting with the goalkeepers, as opposed to the main USMNT where now we call up 4 goalkeepers, we only have 2. We have Aiden Boudry with the Colorado Rapids and Gavin Beavers that has been linked to some clubs recently. Braden, thoughts on these 2? Who do you think gets the nod against Nashville? Let's say that's the most important relevant test, perhaps. Who would you start out of these 2, and what do you think their ceiling is?
Yeah, I mean the Nashville game is the only friendly that we're aware of right now, so it's an interesting one. I'm very curious to see if Beavers stays in camp because this is going to come out a few days after we record it, just due to scheduling. But as we do, he's just made a move to Brøndby in Denmark, so I'm very curious to see if he goes to them immediately or just stays in camp. If he stays, I expect him to be the number 1 in overall in this age group. He's the second best goalkeeper. Obviously, you guys probably know Diego Kochen is the number 1. There isn't official confirmation that he wasn't released, but it's more than likely because he's always here if he can, and Barca are usually pretty stingy. He also had a game this weekend with Barca Athletic that he played in, him and Pedro Soma, who probably also would have been here. So it's a little difficult to get him released, but Beavers is a very capable backup option. So I think ideally he's one of the main guys to watch out for this group. Beaudry as well is somewhere between 3rd and 4th on the depth chart when everyone's available, but he was the starter in the CONCACAF U20 championship over the summer, was really one of the best players in what has to be said was a pretty underwhelming team performance. I thought he was very good throughout the whole tournament, steady, made his MLS debut in the last game of the regular season with the Rapids. So definitely one to keep an eye on. And I mean, with how bad Stefan has been, even though the Rapids seem to be blind to it, maybe he even gets more game time in MLS next season. But definitely 2 very competent goalkeepers. Outside of Cochin, there's also Julian Eystone, who's not here, playing for Brentford's B team. Also likely that he wasn't released, although maybe he wasn't invited, because I'd say these 2 are a little ahead of him. Also in the mix, there's players like Andrew Rick from the Union, Joran Ferry from Nordsjælland in Europe as well. But overall, it's a very stacked goalkeeper group, and these 2 are very capable.
Yeah, I will say I think Bar curious. He was the best player in that tournament. Honestly, it was. Let's just put that behind us. It wasn't ideal, definitely to put it lightly. Now moving on right here to the defenders, we have Freddie Henderson from Stoke City, and then Luca Bombino, a very popular name right here where I'm from in LA. A lot of people rate him really highly. He plays for LAFC. De Tony making a comeback to the rosters right here. The Bayern Munich academy product. We've talked about him in the past. Aiden Harangi playing out of Frankfurt. We have Ethan Kohler from Germany as well, from Werder Bremen. Drew Murray from Freiburg in Germany as well. Nolan Norris from FC Dallas. He tends to be the captain. Owen Prestes with the Crew Academy, and Chibuki Ukaegbu. I think I did that well. From Czech Republic. Nice to see USL academies being represented there. Thoughts on this defender group, Braden?
Yeah, I had to rep Bayern for Tony. Very excited to see him in the camp because he has been invited to multiple U20 camps this cycle, just couldn't get released by Bayern. They thought it was more important for him to stay with their second team, but finally he gets a chance, coincidentally a few days after making his debut with the first team in a friendly against RB Salzburg. Played very well in his limited cameo, so very excited to see what he can do. It is a tough center back group to break into because, I mean, the guys who aren't here are the real names: Nokai Banks, Josh Winder, Matai Akamboni, all play in Europe, all probably were not released, but those are the 3 to beat. But De Tony has a perfect opportunity here to impress not only Marko Mitrovic, but also Poch in the limited time they'll spend together. and even Nashville as well. So hopefully he stands out. The other big name here is Freddie Anderson from Stoke. He's one that, I mean, I'll admit myself, I wasn't even familiar with him. I didn't know he was American eligible, but he's been captaining Stoke City's U21s this season, even made his first team debut in the EFL Cup earlier towards the beginning of the season, and he actually scored in that game as well. So one game for Stoke, one goal. It's rumored that he's going out to Cork City on loan to get some first team football for the rest of the season. He's definitely going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on because he's just emerging onto the radar now as a center back. Like I said, that position group is very stacked, but this is his first look, and maybe he can make a real impact. For the other center backs, you have Ethan Kohler from Werder Bremen, who kind of plays everywhere. He can play the six, he can play right back, he can play center back. I believe he's here as a center back just based on the complexion of the roster. But he's a versatile tool guy that you can use off the bench. I expect him to probably be that for the remainder of the cycle. And then Uka Igbu, like you mentioned, from Sacramento Republic. He's one of 5 2007s in the roster, meaning he's eligible for the next U20 cycle as well. Very exciting future, and like you said, nice to see USL representation. He moves up from the U19s from last cycle. For the fullbacks, Aiden Harangi is pretty standard right back for Frankfurt, plays for their second team consistently. He's been a mainstay in the cycle as the backup to Leo Duru, who is not here, just got loaned out to Barrow to get some first-team football, so hopefully that goes well for him. The other one to talk about is Priestess at right back. He's a very intriguing player, one of the best players within MLS Next Pro this season, still pretty young at just 18, so I'm very excited to see what he can do. His first look with the U20s, hopefully he can impress because I think he's one of the most underrated names in this group. For the left backs, it's pretty standard stuff. Like you said, Nolan Norris, the captain of this group, and then Luca Bombino from LAFC. These have been the two main left backs the whole cycle. There's also Reed Baker Whiting, who wasn't released by the Sounders. Frankie Westfield wasn't released by the Philadelphia Union, so a little bit shorthanded in terms of the fullbacks, but it is what it is. It's still a very capable group and a lot of promising defenders here.
Absolutely, and we finish this list with a USL Academy player. We move on. We start the midfielders with one of them. It's Matthew Corcoran. Was hyped a while back, kind of has stagnated a little bit. He plays for the Birmingham Legion FC. We have Taha Habrun, Arjun. So some of you guys that may be longtime viewers, we used to have Arjun right here. He's a big group fan, really likes this guy. And to be fair, he scores quite a lot for this age group as well. We have Darius Lane coming over from Brighton Hove Albion. Everybody knows them in the Prem. We have Cruz Medina, who's kind of testing the waters with Mexico at times, representing San Jose Earthquakes, very hyped player. Brian Moyato from LAFC. Sergio Orahel Jr. from Chicago Fire, and also Brooklyn Reigns from the Houston Dynamo. The midfield group, I think, is a little bit shorthanded. Your thoughts? I'm curious to see, Brandon. Do you think any of these guys, looking over, since it is a position that usually catches a lot of eyes, do you think any of these guys stands out for, let's say, the next Olympic cycle? Who do you think has the highest ceiling here?
Yeah, it does have to be said there are some players missing. I mentioned Pedro Soma already, who's usually the starting 6. Matthew Corcoran's here instead of him, and Brian Moyato as well at that position. Corcoran was very talented. He was part of the U17 cycle heavily in the last World Cup, but picked up a long-term injury, just came back from that. Excited to see him with the group for the first time. You have Brian Moyato as well from LAFC. I'll admit it, I don't really see it with this guy, to be honest. He's one of the older players in this group and really hasn't played too much for LAFC's second team. Honestly, I don't think he has a chance to make the final roster just because Soma's not here and some other names as well. Onto the 8s, you have, of course, Taha Habrun and Brooklyn Reigns are the main ones. They're been mainstays in the team for a while now. The main name that's missing here is Benjamin Kramaski, but he will be training with the team for a day or two because he's with the Camp Cupcake team, the senior USMNT. Deserved chance for him there. There's also at the 10 position, Nico Shakiris isn't here. Of course, like you mentioned, the best player, the Golden Ball winner for the CONCACAF U20 Championship over the summer, but it'll be interesting to see how Cruz Medina can step up in his place. Other names that are here, Sergio Orahel has been somewhat consistent part of this group. I'm not really too impressed by him either, to be honest. And then Darius Lane is a very intriguing one. He's only gotten a U18 call-up so far this cycle, his first look with the U20s, but excited to see what he can do. You guys might remember from the Olympics, he was part of their training camp right before the tournament started in France. Him and Axel Perez, a fellow 07 who's not in this camp, but very talented player for Brighton. And we know how good they are at identifying talent. So he's definitely one to watch, and hopefully he makes a good impression.
Absolutely, and firing up top, where I think we had the biggest issue during the summer, we have Kiro Figueroa, who was involved back then. Obviously, everybody knows him coming over from Liverpool. Caden Glover from St. Louis, their first ever, I think, homegrown player, making strides there in MLS Next Pro. Xavier Gozo, who was also involved there and has played in MLS. Now, this season was sort of a breakthrough for him in terms of appearances. And another player that tests the waters a lot with the Mexican setup as well, Ruben Ramos Jr. from LA Galaxy. Thoughts on these forwards, Braden? Who do you think would start if there was to be a relevant friendly right here or in the scrimmage against Nashville?
Yeah, this is a really weird forward group, to be completely honest. I know it's marred a lot by players not being released. Of course, you have Cole Campbell from Dortmund. He's the main name, not only for the forwards, but I think in the roster in general. Peyton Miller, who is traditionally a left back for the Revolution, but for whatever reason has been played as a winger. He's not here either. So another name missing. Christian Fletcher, who's on loan at Nottingham Forest. U21s isn't here. Luke Brennan from Atlanta United also wasn't released. A lot of winger options missing, as well as David Vasquez and CJ Only from the Philadelphia Union. Both of them also were not released for this camp. So there's a lot of depth here that isn't in the roster, but we kind of have to make do with what we have here. Carol Figueroa has been a pretty consistent part of this team as a striker, playing for Liverpool's academy, of course, starting to find more consistent minutes after a pretty slow start to the season. He's probably going to be the main number 9 here. Him and Caden Glover as a backup, one of the other 07s who's eligible for the next cycle. I'll be honest, I think he's mainly just here because there's some other names that aren't. I think he's basically just a stopgap, but definitely a very talented player that has potential to be a big part of the next cycle. And then you have Xavier Goso and Ruben Ramos, who are both interesting forwards because they are, or at least have been played as a winger, primarily more so Goso, but both of them can also play up top. They've done that for their clubs. Goso, I think, is more of a true winger. If we were to play with a front three, which I would assume we will, I think both of them will start alongside Kirill. But like you said, Goso and Ramos both with breakthrough seasons, especially Ramos in MLS Next Pro. He had a very good year, double-digit goal contributions. Honestly, I don't rate any of these forwards too highly, at least right now. I think there's a lot of talent missing here, and it plays a key part. Even for the strikers, you have the likes of Marco Zambrano, who isn't here, Aiden Dausch, but ultimately, these are the guys who get it done. I think it's by far the weakest group out of what we have here, but there's still some names to watch.
Absolutely. I think this was probably the position group that got hurt the most with the lack of releases, but it's understandable as well for clubs to not release them in January. A lot of these guys are overseas, they have games, but let's hope that these guys can impress. I don't know if there will be a stream or not. I highly doubt it. As always, it's a little bit difficult. If anyone from USSF is watching us, this is not, it's just a very healthy critique right here, constructive criticism. Please make it a little bit more, the availability to watch the games. We kind of have to bend the rules a little bit, going to links from the Moroccan Federation when they post it, or a newspaper, but it's very difficult to watch them. If not, regardless, we'll wish them the very best of luck. Let us know in the comments below what you think about these players. Some of the more flashier names are not here, but will you be looking out for any of these players? Do you rate them highly or not? Let us know. We'll make sure to respond to the comments. Make sure to leave a like below, subscribe, share with your friends, and we'll see you next time.